Thank you, Oliver, for your introduction. I'm very happy to be here today with you. I saw the list of the participants, and I'm very happy that I can provide you some insights into the diversity that we have in Switzerland. We are an international, very international-driven country, as Oliver has explained just now. However, we have also a very strong diversity, which also impacts how we do business in Switzerland. It's important we are international, but in order to build trust with people in Switzerland, as it's also the case in other regions, it's also important to be aware of the diversity, acknowledge the diversity, and know what makes people proud, and based on this, build long-term relationship with Swiss people and trust-based relationships. As Oliver mentioned, I am a professor in international management and organizational behavior. I joined the Zurich University of Applied Sciences 2 weeks ago. Before, I was for over 20 years working in the academia in the French part. As mentioned, my research focuses on intercultural collaboration for innovation and creative outcomes, and majority of my research has been done in the context of internationalization processes, mergers, acquisitions, and also the new world of work. I will share today personal experiences that I have had in Switzerland. I am originally from Warsaw, that as you can see from this picture. However, I have lived also already as a child in Africa, and during my university studies, I spent some time also in Canada. Returned to Warsaw from Canada, and then I received a scholarship, Swiss government scholarship, for international students to do PhD in Switzerland, and afterwards I did my postdoc at the University of Geneva, and I studied also mergers acquisitions in Mexico. So that brought me to Mexico quite often, and for the data collection. So that's me in Mexico, which I enjoyed a lot. And after having worked and completed the project of this German merger in Mexico, I moved more into China, since the Chinese mergers and acquisitions are quite unique. They have their own characteristics, and this is what was interesting for me. As I have been working with China for the last almost 10 years, and in fact, I have many, thanks to this project and collaboration with China, I have many friends, academic friends in Slovenia. We meet on regular basis, and I have learned also a lot from them about the Chinese companies in the region. Maybe before I start with giving you some insights into how we do business here in Switzerland, I would just like to ask you whether you have some maybe questions already. You met many experts on Tuesday, and maybe you already have some questions which pop up with regards to culture and that you would like me to address. So I will start with my presentation, but feel free to interrupt me any moment that you would. We have just 40 minutes together, and I would be happy to zoom on the questions which are most relevant for you. So I will talk, but feel free to interrupt me. I structured the presentation in 2 parts, cultural diversity. Yes, we're international, but we are an extremely diverse small country, just like the entire Central East European region is also, we have a strong diversity, and it impacts culture and business etiquette. And then I will also reserve some time for questions and answers. But as I mentioned, feel free to interrupt me any moment. So we have a diversity. I will just give you some examples of diversity. Maybe many of you have already been to Geneva. Geneva is one of the most international and multicultural cantons in Switzerland. It's not really Switzerland. It is in Switzerland, but it's there are not many Swiss people in Geneva. Already the canton is small. Many people live in France, and it's extremely multicultural with the multinationals and then with international organizations. Then you move a bit to the east. We are now in Canton de Vaud, also at the Geneva Lake. Lausanne is already more Swiss, but still remains international. But it's also depends which part of the Canton de Vaud. So when I lived in Geneva, I spent many years in Geneva. There were hardly any Swiss people, and afterwards I moved towards Canton de Vaud, and this is where I really discovered Romandie, the mindset of Swiss French people. Currently, I live in Fribourg, so you go a little bit more to the east. Canton of Fribourg is still in Romandie, but it's already, the cultural diversity is very different than, and the people who live there are different, because we have really relatively pure Swiss, and some of them are French speakers, and some of them are German speakers. Very traditional in Fribourg, people living there for 100 years. For example, the house that we rent is 400 years old, and as you can see in the pictures, is a quite old with heritage city. Also, to give you an insight about the cultural diversity, we have here Geneva Lake, but only the Swiss Germans and the Geneva people call it Geneva Lake. We call it Lac Le Mans. So one of the things that I was told when I moved to Vaud is not to say Geneva Lake. The Romand people, they really, really dislike it. So sometimes we also teach Chinese students to say Lemon Lake. That makes Geneva, Swiss French people very happy. So already in the Romandie, so in the French part, we are a minority. 23% of Swiss people live in the French part. The majority are the Swiss Germans. And here again, so I haven't mentioned, I have been living in Switzerland for 20 years now. Mainly in Romandie, so I discovered the diversity there. But then the Swiss Germans are also extremely, there's an extremely strong diversity there as well, also linguistic diversity. The Swiss Germans, they speak dialects, and each canton has its own dialect. So already Bern is next to Fribourg, but the Bern dialect is different than the Fribourg dialect. So it's also, and some dialects are easy to understand, like Zurich dialect or St. Gallen dialect is quite straightforward. It's a bit classical. But where I live in Fribourg, we have Zenzler German, and this one is extremely difficult. It's completely different than the rest of the dialects. However, what is also interesting that yes, we do have 4 languages. Swiss German is the majority language, but 24% of the population has a different mother tongue. It's none of those 4, and it's mainly English and Portuguese. So besides the Swiss diversity, we have a strong diversity in terms of also nationalities that we have in the country. We have language diversity. However, it's also important to know that there is something maybe you've heard. Have you heard about Rüstigraben? It's called kind of like a potato border. So you see the blue part. The blue part is separated from the red part by Rüstigraben. That means that the mindset in those 2 parts is different, very different. So French Swiss, they have a different mindset than the Swiss Germans. which you can also see very clearly when we have the votations in our referendums.
Maybe Anna to tell the Röstigraben. Röstigraben is called Röstigraben because Rösti is a food which is by the farmers in Switzerland. They used to eat this potato dish all the time called Rösti, and they don't eat that in the French part. So
No.
that's why we call it the Röstigraben, which means, you know, everything right. The German part is Rösti, and the other guys. And Graben means it's a valley. It's kind of like the valley that divides Switzerland. Via this very famous dish, which I can invite you to eat if you're in Zurich. It's very good.
Yeah, I can also confirm that we eat more. I see more rusty dishes here in the Zurich area than in the Romandie. But in Romandie we eat fondue. So if you visit Romandie, we'll be happy to invite you for a cheese fondue. So in fact, Röstigraben is at this river, which is called Sardine. It is in Fribourg. It is exactly where I live. So the city where I live is bilingual. The majority of people speak French, and there's this Zenzler German minority. In fact, those communities, they don't really mingle, which surprised me. You will have either Swiss French schools or Swiss German schools, but we don't have bilingual schools. The bilingualism is introduced only at the high school level, which surprised me very much, because when I lived, besides living in Switzerland, I also lived in France and in Germany. And when you are in Berlin, you will have all those bilingual schools, German, Spanish, German, Polish. I think there are 3 German, Polish schools. But in Switzerland, we don't have public schools which are bilingual. So we, even in this bilingual canton, the Swiss Germans are kind of in their own communities, and then the Swiss French in their own communities, and they only start to mingle at the age of 16 in high school. But in fact, Swiss people, they are, in terms of education, is also a bit different than rest of Europe, because the apprenticeship system is extremely well developed. So anyways, majority of the youth, they don't go to high school. So I don't know how they mingle on that level, but on the high school level, 20% of the youth they go to high school, then they start slightly to mingle. So German dialects, officially, Swiss Germans say that dialect is only an oral. You just use it in speaking, but I can see that from chats, my kids go to a Swiss German school in Fribourg, and the young people, they write in Swiss German. Sorry for that. I have a noise. It's we have this very automatic system of shutters. So my kids, they go to a Swiss German school. They joined the Swiss German school 2 years ago, when they were shocked when they saw WhatsApp groups in Swiss German. It was in the Zenzler Deutsch, and my husband, who is German, he couldn't understand any single word. It's really a very specific dialect, and you have all those different dialects. I can imagine Oliver speaks the classical dialect from Zurich. I don't think you speak Wallis or Zenzler, which is very special. So we have this linguistic diversity, which also makes a little bit Swiss Germans and Swiss French a bit different. Swiss French even say that they can recognize Swiss Germans just by the body language. There are also implications on communication. So the Swiss Germans are more direct. So they are a little bit more like we are in Eastern Europe, Central Eastern Europe, at least in Poland. So I very much like the Swiss German communication, more direct, to the point. The whole language already German it's a direct language. So and in French we have those always those politeness forms which make the language less direct and indirect. On top, the Swiss Germans are less hierarchical. In the Romandie, we do this vous voyez, per vous, and in Swiss German part, it's a bit more you, like tu, duzen is more common. It's more direct, less hierarchical. And then what is important is that as I mentioned already, we don't so much mingle French Swiss with Germans. We don't have this bilingual schools because I see it as, and this is what also people say, local people, the minorities kind of protect their language. Idea is that the majority German is not too much present in the Romandie, so that Romandie French part remains French. And there's a strong identification what I see in the French part with the French language. As I mentioned, there are many foreign nationals in Switzerland, majority from Europe, at 25% of the population, but here we're excluding the border commuters. And the workforce in Switzerland is, we have, of course, the Swiss, the international people, foreign people in Switzerland, but we also have the border commuters from Germany and from France, which is an extremely important workforce. I think in Geneva, it's a, I wouldn't say it's half of the workforce, but a really huge percentage of the Geneva workforce lives in France. Foreign nationalities represent half of all foreigners, so majority it's Germany, French, Italians, and Portuguese. And one of the reasons for this is also the fact that Switzerland is very strict with citizen criteria. So I have lived in Switzerland for, okay, I partially lived in France, 20 years, but it's different than in Germany or in France. For example, my children are born in Switzerland, but they are not automatically Swiss. So that's why also we have such a high foreign population. However, I have some additional statistics. So 20% of those foreigners were born in Switzerland, just like my children, for example. 44% of those live permanently in Switzerland. There are more Germans, of course, in the German part and French nationals in the French part. In Romandie, in the French part, there are more foreign people than in the German part, so that maybe makes Romandie a bit also different from the German part. And what's also relevant is that the foreigners are highly qualified. So statistically speaking, an average foreigner, especially from Europe, is on average has a higher qualifications than an average Swiss. So here we talk really about qualified workforce. So talking about foreigners in Switzerland, we also have a Central East European community, and maybe the question should be, what do we have in common as a Central East European diaspora in Switzerland? So my reflection about us, about Central East European diaspora, even though we are so different, I even wrote a short article which was published in Swiss Export about the diversity in the region. What we have in common is that we are still perceived as so us Central East Europeans, we tend to be perceived as a homogeneous region. An average person doesn't understand and does not acknowledge diversity that we have. So that makes us similar living in Switzerland. The overall perceptions are very positive. Overall, as foreigners from European Union, we are perceived as very professional, have excellent education. Overall, the image of Central East Europeans is also to be very hardworking, creative, and overall Swiss people have admiration for our linguistic skills. So the image is very positive, and I have lived here and worked for 20 years, and I'm very happy. I also lived in Germany and for 3 years. I spent quite 15 years in France, so I can really have a nice comparison of how I really enjoy living in Switzerland because of this diversity which we have, open-mindedness, and overall the foreign community is also very interesting to interact with, and also Swiss people as well. Before I move on, do you have any questions or comments?
Anna, sorry, Martin here. I will ask you some questions at the end, because Tjasha from the embassy wrote me yesterday and they're related to your topic, and maybe at the end will be just fine. Or do you prefer that I ask you now?
As you can ask now.
Okay. Just a second, because they are in Slovenian. I just a little bit. So,
but maybe we can give a word to Isto Grmak in between and Vanya Bele.
Perfect for me.
okay, yes, for sure.
Mr. Grmak?
Gospa Vanja, kar izvolite, bom jaz za vami.
Hvala lepa. Hello, Professor Anna. I have a question. Why so many Portuguese people in Switzerland?
Thank you for this question. This has also more historical perspective, and there was in the 70s there was a very important emigration wave to Switzerland from Italy and from Portugal. However, in Switzerland, current emigration to Switzerland, it's a highly qualified workforce. In the 70s, there were many Italians and Portuguese more for manual work. So it's more historical, and majority of those people, I guess, they have been born already in Switzerland. But it's not the emigration, the citizenship criteria are quite strict. That makes that some people might be even born in Switzerland, but are not Swiss. So Portuguese, Italians is more historical as well.
And maybe
okay,
if I can add a couple of things here, because my Chamber of Commerce with the 17 Central Eastern European countries, when I started a year ago, I was kind of like trying to figure out how many people are actually living here from those countries. And the statistics in Switzerland are a bit special. If you have a Swiss passport, you can have dual nationality. If you have a Swiss passport and let's say a Slovenian passport, you will not be shown in the official statistics from the state immigration register. I always try to find out how many people actually we have from Central Eastern Europe with a diaspora background. I say it's way over 1 million. So one thing that I'm always mentioning is that the region overall has probably the strongest footprint in Switzerland. And the Portuguese and the Italians, they have something quite special. They don't like to get the Swiss passport. I mean, this is maybe a bit just an observation from my side, but if they are still in the charts and they came in the 60s, their children, they should all be no longer in the chart. So if Anna's kids become the Swiss Polish nationality, they will not be shown as Polish in Switzerland. So my way of thinking is just that they also did not very well, let's say, maybe got accustomed to it because they were manual laborers, and they probably stick to each other's, and they go the only holidays they're doing is they go back home, etc. I think they are a little bit overrepresented in the statistics in comparison to other countries which are more open to actually get the Swiss passport. But anyway, Anna, that was not very scientific, and you can say that was completely bollocks what I said, but anyway, my observation.
Yeah, but you have also exams. So, those exams to pass the nationality apparently they are not that simple. So that shows also that there are strict criteria to become Swiss. So that makes the country also highly diverse, which also has an impact on, so here again, the statistics, you know it already, strong diversity, but that also has an impact about how we do business in Switzerland, because you have the regional differences, Rüstigraben, you have the French part, the German part, and then you have also the international community living there. However, there are some common points which we all in Switzerland share, and what makes us identify with the Switzerland. First of all, we are a low power distance country. So in Switzerland, we strongly value equality. This is one of the key values, and this is also makes it so different, Switzerland from Poland. In Poland, we have this elite system with schools, and you need to be the best and go to the most recognized high school and go to the best universities. In Switzerland, the focus is on equality, of equal chances for everybody. And if anybody, I wouldn't say that we do really have fully equality, because there's now we have the whole discussion about equality between men and women. But if anybody explicitly acts against any equality or in a way of, in an elitist way, it's extremely badly perceived. It's really the key value is the humbleness and equality. So in Switzerland, we have a very low acceptance that some individuals hold more power than other people. So point one, equality, humbleness, and decisions are being taken, important decisions in a way that none of the subgroups in the country is negatively impacted. It has also implications for the dress code. Of course, depends on the banking industry. Banking is a bit more formal than SMEs, but overall it tends to be smart casual. I also say it tends to be smart casual because I can also compare same industries between Switzerland, for example, and Poland. And it's much more relaxed in Switzerland, the dress code, than it will be in my home country. In terms of collectivism, Switzerland, my observation is relatively collectivist in terms of consensus driven. So another value that we have, and everybody shares it independently, whether they are the French or German, Portuguese or Italian or Central East European diaspora, we are consensus driven. The decisions are also made in consensus with different stakeholders, so that every group, subgroup, minority group is not threatened by the decision. It's also on the canton level, when we have some initiatives for internationalization, we consult different chambers and economic promotions in a way that everybody has its the field, and others don't they are there to help but not to enter into a sphere that is managed by different stakeholders. Switzerland is also hardworking, and here we had a few years ago we had a referendum on additional holidays, and in fact it was rejected. So Swiss voters rejected longer holidays in the referendum. So in fact we have a system, we work hard, but the quality of life is very good, and people enjoy it. And while we are happy, it's also performance-driven country. We know that we need to work in order to enjoy our life. There is, comparing also to Poland, there's a lower tolerance for ambiguity. So Swiss people are less, like in Poland, we are extremely agile and adapting. Swiss people, they have the system that was being followed. And there's this kind of syndrome that I see. It's called mouton à cinq pattes, and I only thought that we use it in Romandie, but in the German part we also say it. How do we say diese Kuh? I don't know. Swiss Germans have a different translation. Here it's Ovca z piętymi nogami. In the German part, there's the same saying, but they don't use a sheep, but they use a cow. So at the moment there's a bit of uncertainty, ambiguity. People start to think, oh my goodness, I have to respond to so many different requirements, and the one is contradictory to the other one, and people don't navigate like we would navigate in Central Eastern Europe. So low tolerance for ambiguity, very long-term driven, very future-oriented, very pragmatic. I compare to Poland. Poland is rather short-term oriented, very much the history is still present and proud of independence, which took place 100 years ago. Swiss, they are less history-driven, tradition-driven, but more innovation and very pragmatic, which also makes it nice to work with people. This impacts the rules of the game. So I gave kind of the kind of insights into the key values that we have in Switzerland, but mainly based also on my observation and the last 20 years living in different cantons and also Swiss-German part, is that we are performance driven, very much future oriented, doing. We have a system which works, and it's expected that everybody follows the system. Sometimes when I go back to Poland, people say, oh, but it's so strict. Yes, maybe there are some things which are a bit strict, but it works. And we like the way the system works, so we respect it. And if I took the example of the street lights, even in Berlin, the orange is green. So in Berlin, the cars will drive on orange light, because in Warsaw as well. But for us, red is red, orange is orange, and green is green. So the system works, and we like to follow it, even though it's strict. I mentioned we are consensus driven. Equality, that was a key value that oriented also the COVID discussions, that when we close the schools, that some kids are not from underprivileged groups are not discriminated, that we all have the same education, that the COVID restrictions, they do not limit and threaten the equality that we have in the country. We don't talk about money, equal, so also humble, but very much discreet, do not like to disturb. This is also something which really surprised me. So some people might look a bit shyish. People talk to each other a bit less, especially if you are not introduced or just randomly, a bit less than what I'm used to. But it's because also of this value of not disturbing, you know, speak quietly and slowly, be discreet. And I saw it all the time. Otherwise, even though we are an international place, as you could see from Oliver's presentation, but people are proud of nature. People just love the mountains, and they love the lake. They love the villages. People are extremely close to nature and protecting the nature and being outside. Very proud of the democracy values. Even though we are very international, but people just like the simple life. They like to be in their groups also, and they like those kind of trust-based small cities that people like each other. So what does it mean also for trust building if you come from outside? So that's a part which I think is also quite relevant, and based on my observation also with Swiss people and discussions with Swiss people who are in fact doing business abroad and Swiss people doing business in China, the trust building, long-term trust building with Swiss people takes time. There are some even similar characteristics between Swiss and Chinese in terms of trust building. It's why there's a strong in-group. There are those a bit especially in local places. So outside of Zurich, outside of Geneva, there's a strong in-group. you are born in your village, you go there to the elementary school, then you go to high school, you go to university together, and you form an in-group. So people will have friends who they know for decades, and otherwise they will have colleagues. So to really become a friend of a Swiss person takes time. I also realized that many people are members of one of the parties we have many different parties, and many people are members of the party, and even have ranks in the armies. I'm not too much into this, but some people from my network, like generals, and they have all those ranks, but they work, of course, outside of the army. So otherwise, there's also an in parallel to those clans, family clans. There's also an international community where it's quite easy to mingle and to network. It's also, you can enter the in-group, like Swiss in-group, but it just will take time, and it's easier if you are born in Switzerland and you go through the whole education. Of course, you're part of the in-group. It's still, comparing to Central Eastern Europe, Switzerland is traditional, business is dominated by men. And recently we talk about diversity and inclusion initiatives. It's women are less emancipated than in Central Eastern Europe. There are no, maybe also because we have part-time jobs. In Poland, there are no part-time jobs. So women work just like men. Here it starts to change, but also it's also related to the childcare and this, but it's still quite, there are less women active in business, especially in the local business, than in Poland. We are a monochronic, we have a monochronic communication, even though I told you that we have, Swiss Germans are different from Swiss French, but it's still, the meetings follow a strict agenda. You don't have a meeting without an agenda, and even I really also like it. It's very monochronic, everything step by step. Everybody knows what he or she is doing in this meeting. Working hours is very much like 9 to 5. It's not like in Poland or in China that people work on the weekends and work at night, and kind of, it's usually work is work, leisure is leisure. And email correspondence, what's important, especially in the German speaking part, is you immediately acknowledge receiving of the email. So it's, you receive an email, even if you cannot address it, you acknowledge that you have received it. And this what also makes perception that other people are reliable. So we have now 3 minutes left, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you still might have. And I hope it was insightful also for your trust building with Swiss people.